Hello and welcome to the Cult Vault podcast, your dedicated podcast for uncovering the darkest corners of cults and coercive control. I'm your host, Kacey, and I want to start by thanking each and every one of you for tuning in. Your support fuels our deep dives into these critical issues. Before we get started, a word of caution. Today's episode may contain discussions on abuse, including graphic descriptions of abuse, and covers a variety of human rights violations that may be triggering for some listeners. Please consider this as a trigger warning and proceed with caution. I'm thrilled to announce that I'll be appearing at CrimeCon UK in London on the 7th and 8th of June 2025, and again in Manchester on the 27th of September 2025. Join me and a host of world-leading experts, advocates and noisemakers at the heart of the true crime community. This is the UK's biggest true crime event, and you won't want to miss it. Use the code CULT, C-U-L-T, for 10% off your tickets. And remember, there are flexible tickets and payment plans available to accommodate everyone. This incredible event is sponsored by True Crime, and it's always my favourite weekend of the year. I hope to see some of you there. And for those who want even more from the Cult Vault podcast, you can access early, ad-free content by supporting me at patreon.com/thecultvault, where every pledge not only gives you exclusive access, but also directly supports the continuation of this work. Thank you again for your support and your listenership. Now, let's unlock the vault. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Cult Vault podcast. I think it's nice to take a break from some of the real world issues and real difficult themes of this podcast that we talk about on a weekly basis. And so when this person approached me with their writing and asked if we could have a chat, I was really excited at the idea of breaking up the content a little bit and bringing something new to the podcast. So hello and welcome to the show, Brittany.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I usually start the first part of the podcast by asking each guest to introduce themselves to the listeners.
Okay, so I'm Brittany. I am here in the States. I was born in Illinois, raised and grew up in Colorado, so that is where I am currently. I am a huge book dragon. I love to read, bit of an introvert, so this is kind of new for me. I love spending time with my family. I'm a huge family-oriented person and love all things spooky. I have a dog. He's my baby. And I love anything to do with the water. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Love to read, love to do all the things, the spooky things, and hang out with the family.
Happy 4th of July. I don't know if you're patriotic. I realise the irony of an English person saying that to an American person on July the 4th.
Well, thank you. Yesterday was actually my birthday, so I'm gonna be ready to go after this. So
yeah, it's a week and weekend of celebrations. I've messaged a lot of my friends over the water just saying happy 4th as well. I remember being over in New Jersey one year for the 4th of July, and we'd rented just like a beach house, and there was loads of people at their beach houses, you know, that they go to regularly, and they were absolutely like, they thought it was the funniest thing when they're like, oh my god, it's a Brit, and they thought, and they were like, we just got away from you, that's why we're drinking these beers today. Yeah, it was an experience.
Me on a little bit.
It's I think that some of the toning up is one of the reasons why I really enjoy visiting certain areas of America. But it is the 4th of July today. I don't know if there's any spooky stories related to that particular date, unless you're talking about actual history. It's a bit spooky at times when you're looking at the devastation of certain countries, including the one that I live in now. But you've mentioned spooky and water. I can think of a few times those two things cross over. I went for a cold water swim today in a big open lake, and you can't see the bottom because the water's not clear. And as I was swimming, I got right in the zone, and I was like, I got my breathing regulated. I was like, oh wow, I could swim all day. And as I was going, my leg kicked something like hard and round under the water. So I started like flailing my arms and legs, and as I kicked my leg out, it hit it again. So I was like, oh my gosh, that feels like a body. I was freaking out in the middle of this lake where I couldn't like swim back and I couldn't swim forward to get to shore quickly. I was like right in the middle. It turned out that some of the other people that I was swimming with have also swam into this. It's like a buoy, like a buoy in the water that's half sunken, half submerged. So you can't see it, but it's not low enough that you can avoid it if you're swimming over it. So that's what happened. But that was my spooky water story of this week. Do you find those two things cross over a lot in your work?
Not necessarily in my work, the water and spooky. I haven't come across it yet. But definitely like I love the water, but if I can't see the bottom, I'm a little leery because there's something down there. Like
Yeah,
it has to be. And
exactly.
if I don't know what it is, you know, so yeah, no. I try not to think about it when I get in the water just because I love the water so much, but
That's it, right? I was like, not going to think about it. I'm just going to swim. I'm really loving this swim. And then it happened. And I was like, oh, no, this is it. Oh, I've hit the thing. I've hit the thing that's in the water, whatever it is. The unnamed, like, objects that's just floating underneath you. Oh, honestly, it freaked me out. But anyway, moving on from my woes of the day, I'm hoping next time I get back in the lake, I'll just be able to put it past me and swim kind of in the other half of the lake, away from this thing that's supposedly just
out there to scare swimmers.
Out there under the water. Anyway, we've talked a little bit about your diagnosis of dyslexia and how that has really interwoven with the work that you do. So being a writer and having a diagnosis of dyslexia, how do you think your journey into writing has maybe looked different for people without that diagnosis?
Well, I'm going to be honest, writing was never in my cards. As much as I love to read, I struggled very, very badly as a kid. Came home with a list written backwards, a spelling list. That's when my parents kind of knew something was different. It took me what took my older sister, and she's a speed reader. What took her a day to read took me a month, 2 months to read. So, but I loved to read, so it never really deterred me. I got down on myself, but writing was never going to be something I did. And then, I ended up hearing someone tell me that the Muffin Man was based off of a serial killer. And me being me, I had to look it up. And sure enough, he was. So that kind of got things rolling where I started looking into them and doing some research and decided, you know what? Let's do it. What do you have to lose? If it doesn't happen, it doesn't go anywhere, then it doesn't happen. But then as I started progressing in my writing, I was like, oh, okay, this is fun. I had someone who could edit it for me in case, spelling is horrible for dyslexic people. If I don't have a dictionary or my phone to help me autocorrect, I have so many spelling errors, it's not even funny. So
you say that you went to look into the Muffin Man and the story was true.
Yes.
What did you find out when you, because that's the first time I'm hearing this. So now I'm interested in like what that research looks like.
So I don't remember if I read it in a book or someone had mentioned it to me, but they made that claim that the Muffin Man was based off of a serial killer. And I called BS. I went online, I Googled it, and then I found, Wikipedia, which I know Wikipedia you can't really trust, but I was like, all right, let's start there. I looked at it. That got my interest piqued even more. So then I started looking for different sites and books and things that I could find to tell me more about this Muffin Man. And he actually was known as the Drury Lane Dicer. Yes, and he was one of the first serial killers in London. So, or the one of the first like noted serial killers in London. So that really piqued my interest, and I just kept digging into him. And then he fell off my radar because I was like, oh, that's neat. That's cool. Okay, back to life. And then it fell off my radar. Well, then I was having a conversation with my mom about true crime because we're both true crime buffs. And she mentioned something. I was like, oh, did you know the Muffin Man is based off of a serial killer? It was like this fun little tidbit that I could just share with people because I knew. And she goes, yeah, and Ring Around the Rosie is based off the plague. I was like, well, everybody knows that. And then that just kind of stuck. And I just sat there and thought about it. And I was like, how many people really know that? How many are really that dark? Because London Bridge, well, it fell down. So obviously there's something dark there. Ring Around the Rosie, the Muffin Man. How many are that dark? So then I started thinking about it, fell off the radar again. And I was actually listening to a different podcast, and they deep dive into things. And so I kind of took a page out of their book, and I ended up getting laid off of my job, my career of over 10 years. Was looking for a new job, fighting with unemployment, had all this time on my hands, and decided to revisit my friend, the Muffin Man. And then when I got about 10 deep, that's when I looked at it and I was like, you know what? You have something here. You're having a blast researching all of this stuff. It's fascinating to you. It's spooky. Someone else is going to find it just as fascinating. So let's do something. Let's write a book. And that's kind of how it all started.
When you were 10 deep, how many, like, off the top of your head, like, old myths, fables, nursery rhymes can you reel off that are rooted in, like, either real life events or inspired by things that probably did happen?
So we know the big ones, London Bridge, the Muffin Man. I had a feeling Mary, Mary, Quite Contrary was one. So it turns out it was, and so was Three Blind Mice, and those two are actually interconnected. Georgie Porgy, Peter Pumpkin Eater. I had a feeling that one was probably dark because he talks about putting his wife in a pumpkin. So I was like, it might have a true crime origin. The Three Little Pigs, for obvious reasons. So I mean, there were quite a few that I had an idea that they would be dark, so I had a place to start, and then from there I kept going. I started looking up rhymes that I knew but wasn't sure, and to see if they had a true crime origin. And if I found that it did, I kind of wrote it down and put it aside and then went to the next one. So I found all of the rhymes. Some of them I didn't even know, and figured just because I'm here in the States, I might not know it, but other people might, and we're in different places. So just because I don't know it doesn't mean someone else in, New York might not know it, or the UK might not know it. So I wrote them all down. And then when I had my list, because I wasn't sure how many I was going to do, I wasn't sure how long the book was going to be or the chapters. I knew I wanted each chapter to be its own rhyme.
Right.
Then I started going back and I started doing the research. And when I found one that was particularly dark or fascinating, I stopped and I just spent days, hours researching and getting all my notes. And then I sat down and I wrote it.
I can see that. I can see, my kids are little kids still. They're 4 and 5. And I can definitely see myself getting a bit worried about telling them nursery rhymes or stories in too much detail. The Three Little Pigs. It's great if they all get to safety in the brick house, but it's a bit difficult to tell the story if the piggies are getting eaten by the wolf along the way, or the wolf blows the house down but the pig's okay. You just don't kind of you don't embellish the story too much to say, I read the pig was eaten by the wolf because he built a house out of rubbish sticks. Also, I find that Little Red Riding Hood, she's wandering through the woods alone. I don't like the idea of telling my kids that, kids should roam through the woods on their own. And then obviously that's such a dark story. Not only is her grandma actually a wolf, the wolf has eaten her grandma and he's got like a big swollen belly. Like, and then like, I don't know, in some iterations, like the grandma is cut out of the wolf's belly. There's like really dark. So, and Hansel and Gretel, really fun story up until it's not.
Yeah.
All of these things, I've thought this to myself, like, oh, actually, I'm not too sure about those stories in their kind of full length versions. I kind of like the sanitized version but they are for children. So I don't know if you have any idea of the history of that sort of movement of like the Grimm tales and how that happened, where it started, or anything like that, just any historical context.
So I don't have historical context. I have my own theory as to how it got from these are really dark and this is our history and we're passing this along because this is our truth and we need people to know about it because they're warnings. That's really what they were created for. It was, they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have the internet. They had no way to tell other people other than these rhymes, these stories that they would tell. So I feel like it's kind of like the game of telephone. So you get one person who doesn't like what someone said and they change it for fun, or they don't like what was said, so they make it their own. They give it just a little bit of flair. And by the time it gets all the way to the end, to us here in, now our time, it's different. It's fluffed up, it's softer, it's more child friendly, whereas before it was, this is about the plague, ring around the rosy. That one was huge because towns would be wiped out because of the plague and you'd never hear of this town again. So it was their way of keeping people alive, telling people about what was going on in all of these places and all of this poverty. So now, because we didn't experience that, now it's just a fun little rhyme where kids get to spin in a circle and then we all fall down and we giggle and we have fun. You don't realize it wasn't that fun because it wasn't a song to dance to. It was a story and a warning. So that's my theory, is it was truly, it was a story, it was a warning that was passed, and it was their truth, their way of telling their truth. Because when you get people in power, sometimes they tell their side and the other side, they don't get heard. So it was a way to tell their truth and their story and to warn people. And now it's just so far removed that it's a fun little game.
Makes me think of the Lizzie Borden rhyme. I guess that's kind of like an actual, not a modern, but a kind of newer version of a horrific, tragic event that took place, and a quirky little rhyme came out of it in the late 1800s of Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks, and when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. So you might hear a kid doing that in the playground with some cool little hand movements with a partner, those kind of like partner clapping games, and think it just sounds like a quirky little rhyme, but actually the history behind it is very dark. And you've just done this over and over and over with all of these different stories that you've put in your book, Whispers in the Cradle.
Yes. Yeah.
So is it like fictionalized breakdowns of each one, or is it an actual like non-fiction, like here's the rhyme in this chapter and here's the history? Or talk us through how you've kind of laid it out.
So I wanted it to be a true crime. So it is nonfiction. It's all the history and the facts that I could find on it, because that just fascinated me. While I think it would be fun to do a story. My dad actually wants me to do like a story, a fictional story. I just found all of the facts and the history behind it all so fascinating that I couldn't make it fictional. I had to stay true to the facts and the history, because I thought that people would enjoy the actual story behind it. Not, I mean, while they might enjoy something that's made up and fun and dark, because there are some spooky people out there like me. But I feel like there are enough people that they get that little taste of history and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Well, and then it makes them think a little bit more, and then maybe they do their own research and see if they can find something different about the same thing that I wrote about, because there's so much information out there. So yeah, I stayed true to the crimes itself.
What periods in time is there like a period where the majority of these events happened, or is it like kind of spread across different time periods?
It's kind of spread against different time periods, just because I just chose a bunch of different rhymes. I do know that they all kind of have the same theme or similar themes. So, a lot of them have to do with a monarchy. A lot of them have to do with the Industrial Revolution. Some of them have to do with exploitation and of people, children, females. I did find that a few times when I was researching. And it was interesting because, you hear about it today, but way back in the day, I feel like it was different. And I say way back in the day, I guess it wasn't way back, but it was far enough removed that you don't really think about it. And I feel like it's changed since then. Like now people are aware of it. It still happens, but people are definitely trying to find ways to get out of those situations. Whereas back then, you heard about it, and if you were lower class, you had no choice. You either went with it or something bad happened, and you kept your mouth shut, and that's just the way it was. So I did find that a few times in my research, and I found that fascinating.
Has it been difficult to kind of look at the true crime side of things and try and keep it, like, I don't know where you stand on this, but trying to keep it like ethical and not sensationalize it too much, or to really dig into your research and find the core elements of the actual truthfulness in each of those cases, and not just the major standout headlines where maybe not all the facts were accurate?
I really did try and do my research and stay removed, because I knew that these were so far back in history. I knew that there was going to be documentation. I was going to find things. I mean, yeah, sometimes it was a little bit of, you kind of read between the lines, but I really tried to stay away from that, because it's true crime. It's factual. I don't want to put any of all of the headlines that we've got today. I didn't want to push that in here, because that wasn't what this was about. That wasn't what the research told me. So I felt like I really tried to stay away from that and stick with the actual history and the facts that I found, as opposed to trying to slip things in and be like, oh, but this person was higher up on the food chain, so of course they did all of these things. It was, no, this person was higher up on the food chain, and, they had the backing of someone even more powerful, and there's research behind, he used to do all of these things. Here's an example. So I really did try and stick with the facts.
And when you were doing your research, did you have like a process that you would go through? Did you have tools or programs or things that would help you go through all of the reading and things to support you with dyslexia?
No, actually. So I had a little notebook that I started with that I have a little bit of OCD too. So when I make a mistake and I have to cross something out, I'm like, you're done. You're in the trash. I can't look at you anymore. So this notebook that I had, it was a horrible hodgepodge of a mess. Like, I had notes up at the top. I had scratched things out. I had notes on the side. And when I looked back at it, it gave me a little bit of anxiety looking at it, going, oh, how are we going to put this into words? And so then I was like, you know what? Let's put it all on the computer. And then we can go through and it'll look pretty when we're moving things around. And so I did that. I ended up typing everything up onto the computer. I did have a function on my my Word where I could talk into it and it would write it for me, which was really nice. Except when I would forget that I had it on and I'd be having a conversation with somebody.
You
And
come back to like four pages of, and then you're like, hang on a minute, what? How much of this is research?
I'm like, gosh darn it, now I have to figure out where it started. So that, I mean, while that was funny, it happened more than once because I would always forget to turn it off. But that was probably my saving grace, was when I went from the notebook that gave me anxiety to putting it on my computer and writing, and then using that function. But I didn't have a way to know, like something to tell me how many times I used a phrase, or was I getting repetitive and redundant, and those types of things. So I actually went to Upwork and I looked at all of the people who did editing, their credentials. I read some of their samples, and then I reached out to someone and said, hey, got this book that I'm working on getting published, and I need someone to edit it for me. I need someone to do that double check, make sure there aren't terrible spelling errors that I missed in my spell check. And then I want to make sure that it flows well and it's not redundant. So I had someone do that portion for me. And when they came back with the corrections, I went through and I made those. But I didn't have, other than that one thing for Word, I didn't have anything to help me write it with my dyslexia. And I do have to say, I think that probably was a good thing that I didn't have something to do it for me. Only because it made me think and work harder for it, which I think made me appreciate it more, if that makes sense. Right. I was able to articulate things better, and while sometimes it was frustrating because it sounds really good in your head, and then you get it on paper and you're like, that is so not what I was trying to say. So it was a little frustrating sometimes, but I feel like me having to do that myself without the help prepared me for maybe doing the next one, and knowing all of the pitfalls that I went through and being able to do it differently, a little bit differently. I did find different software that will actually format it for me after the fact. And I'm like,
yeah,
the things you don't know because you don't know.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about going and meeting up with other podcasters, and sharing tips and tricks with each other, because if you're struggling with something, the chances are somebody else has had that problem and found a solution to it, and then they'll share it with you and you're like, oh my gosh, this is life-changing.
Right.
So I do like to ask, people about the tips and tricks for their respective crafts, because you never know who's listening, who might be thinking, I actually really suffer with dyslexia and I don't know how to put onto paper this brilliant idea that I have. And I am really looking forward to asking you some more questions about that as well. But I read in your emails to me that you wrote this book in secret for 2 years.
I did. I didn't tell anybody I was writing it. Because at first I wasn't sure if it was going to go anywhere. I wasn't sure if I really was going to publish, because I knew publishing can get expensive and all the things. And while I did look into it to make sure that I had the capital to do it, I was nervous. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I didn't know if halfway through I was going to peter out and be like, well, just kidding. We don't want to do this anymore. This isn't as good as I thought it was. Let's just scrap it. So I wasn't sure. But I also didn't want the pressure. With being dyslexic and it being my very first book, I knew my family would be extremely supportive. I also knew that they would start asking me about it. oh, where are you at? Oh, what did you find out? Oh, this, oh, this. And while I would have loved that, because there were a few times where I found something in my research and all I wanted to do was share it with someone, and I couldn't because I just didn't want, one, I didn't want to give anything away. I wanted it to be a bit of a surprise, but I didn't want in my head that kind of pressure, because I don't think they would ever pressure me like that. That's not how my family is. They're extremely supportive. It's just more I get into my own head, and then it's okay, well, now you got a deadline. Okay, now you have to do this and you have to do this, and I wasn't sure how long it was going to take me. So I really tried to keep it close to the chest, and I didn't tell anyone until Christmas of this last year.
So you sat down and presented your family with a manuscript.
Actually, so my younger sister figured out that I was writing a book, and she wasn't supposed to, but it kind of was my fault. So she actually helped figure out the final title for my book. I was at that final stage. I was getting ready to send it in to do the final editing and everything, and I needed a title. And so I went to her and I said, hey, if you went to a bookstore and you saw these 10 titles, which one would you choose? And her immediate reaction was, are you writing a book? I was like, yes, but you're not supposed to know, so keep your mouth shut. She's like, I promise I won't tell anybody. Can I make a suggestion? I said, please do. And I believe she changed the word for cradle, because I think I had something else. And she's like, what if you did whispers like in the cradle, because they're nursery rhymes and they're stories for children? And I was like, oh my God, I love that. Can I steal it? She goes, absolutely.
It's really creepy. The word cradle makes me like,
right?
He's the one about the cradle in the tree. Like, but that's a sad story as well.
Yes. So then I was like, okay, well, I gotta do something really special for her, because she did help me with this title, and that I feel like it made the title, just changing one word. And so I decided I wanted to give her the very first copy that I got once it was published. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. It didn't get published in time. I didn't get it to the publisher in time. And so I was like, you know what? We're going to print out the final manuscript. So I printed it out. I stuck it in her gift, because I got her something else too. Stuck it in there, wrapped it up. And Christmas morning came around and everyone's opening their gifts. And she opened it and she goes, this is really heavy. And she looked at me and she goes, is this your book? And I just looked at her and I nodded. And my dad did a double take because he heard it, but it was kind of loud. And then she pulled it out and she got all teary-eyed. She goes, this is your book? You finished it? And I said yes. And everybody stopped. It was like you could hear a pin drop. And my family looked at me and they went, wait, you wrote a book? I said, I did. And it's going to the publishers within the next couple of weeks. So yeah, I wrote a book, and they were so surprised, so excited, couldn't wait to get a copy when it was published. And yeah, I didn't tell anybody until Christmas morning, and they found out when my sister started crying.
That is such a wholesome Christmas. That is, and Christmas is always nice, and well, for most people, for some people it can be extremely re-traumatizing and triggering, and I don't want to kind of wash over that. But Christmas typically can be, very wholesome family time. But January is very tough, doomy and gloomy, and everyone's broke, and the weather's rubbish, and the days are short, and the weather's cold. But you have a book and it's published in January, so that's like really exciting to happen just after Christmas.
Yes, it was definitely very exciting. And it was funny because when it did get published, and I got the email, I told my family I came over with some champagne, and I was like, guess what happened? It published.
That is so wholesome.
Then I invited everybody over. Yes. And then I invited everybody over to reveal it to everybody. And funny story, I went on to Amazon to get it, 2-day shipping and all of that fun stuff. Well, it told me that I wouldn't get it because I wanted the hardcover. I wouldn't get it for 5 days. I was like, oh, everyone's coming over on Saturday. I won't have it in time. No big deal. So I got the ebook. Well, then I went on and it said 2 days for the paperback. And I was like, fine. So I have one of every version of my book. and it showed up 10 minutes before everybody got to my house. I was following the Amazon man because I needed that physical book so I could put it on display and surprise everybody.
Not sending you copies of your own book. What's happened here? I see people doing unboxing videos of their own books where they get given loads of copies to like sign and hide away in bookstores and libraries and stuff. What happened here? You're going to Amazon. The big, some people call them the book killers, the killers of the book industry, and you're having to buy your own book from them. What? What?
Well, so the publisher I went through is an online publisher. And they did send me an email and said, if you want to buy more than 10 copies, use this email. And I was like, I just want a copy. They said, if you're getting 1 to 2 copies, Amazon's your best bet. So because I went through an online publisher, it was a little different than going through like one of the big publishers that they get you all of this stock and all of the things. It's all included in their kind of price point, I guess. So mine, they did what I needed them to do. It got it out to everybody, and they formatted it for me because I couldn't figure out how to format to save my life. So
that's fair enough. Right? It's like hard to get published. It's tricky. Like, I don't know if you have any tips or tricks about that particular process, but I know how many people have manuscripts ready and just nobody to approach.
Well, I did find there is a program out there that I found through an author friend that I met through another friend, and it's called Atticus, and it's for Windows. There's another one, I don't remember what it is for Mac, but it's similar. Atticus works for both, but it will format for you, so you can just type right into it, kind of like a Word document, or if you already have your manuscript in a Word format, you can upload it to Atticus and it will split it out for you, but it will format it all for you so it's ready for you to send out to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Ingram Spark, all of those places. You can send it out to them, and because they're their own printer, it's already ready formatted for them. So that one was a big one that I found that I didn't know, which is the reason I went through a publisher. Found out you don't necessarily need a publisher. While it's nice to have one, you can do it yourself. I am finding that I am self-promoting. So I know publishers, some of them have marketing teams and all of those things that will do all of that stuff for you. Whereas if you do it yourself, you're doing the legwork. You're not just putting it online and waiting for the money to roll in. You're really doing that legwork of social media posts and reaching out to podcasts or libraries. I reached out to a couple libraries that said they were going to acquire my book. So the legwork it's not easy, but if you want it to go somewhere, you do it. So I would say if you're not going to go through a publisher, and I would do your research on the publisher, then just know that you're the one who's going to be doing your legwork. You're going to be doing your own promoting, your own, getting banners and things like that made. You're going to be the one doing those things. And I do have to say, it's fun. It's a lot of work. It's tiring. But I've learned so much that I wouldn't have learned if I hadn't just done it.
Right. Yeah. I've found that process a lot with podcasting, but it doesn't have to take some time to get, to where we both are now. It's a lot of legwork and it doesn't really ever stop. There's always new tools. There's always new programs. There's always new contacts. There's always new things to be learning in both of those respective industries. But your family's reaction to you writing a book, and publishing a book. I mean, it sounds really wholesome and supportive. Were any of them a bit put out that you hadn't included them in the process of writing a book?
No, actually, they were floored that I wrote a book, just because they know I'm dyslexic. My dad actually told me when he finished reading it, he said not that he didn't think that I could write because I'm such a huge book dragon. He said it had nothing to do with that. He was so impressed that it was so well thought and so in depth, and some of the things that I said, he was just so impressed. He almost made me cry. I might have squeaked out a tear or two. But it was funny because after I had published and everyone was so excited, I had literally just published. And my dad looks at me and he goes, "So are you going to write another one?" And,
Oh my gosh.
and I looked at him and I went, "Whoa, time out here. I just published. Let's see how this one does before I commit." And like a week later, I was like, I got the writing bug, so I'm writing another one.
Oh, he just enjoyed it, It's like I could read another one of them. Oh,
He
that's
did.
so lovely. When you were doing your research for your writing, what was the most surprising thing you found across any of these stories? The biggest thing that made you go, "Whoa, I did not expect that."
Um, I think the biggest thing was how truly dark they were. Like when I was pulling them up and I was researching them and I saw that they were dark and had true crime stories behind them, I was like, okay, they're dark. Let's do this. But as I would research each one and get farther and farther into the story, the history, I was truly floored by how dark they were. Like the Drury Lane Dicer, the Muffin Man. They talk about exactly what he did to the children, which I I I had no words, and I just kind of looked at it for a few minutes before I could even move past it, just going, "Oh, okay." I mean, that would definitely give him his nickname. But I mean, how truly dark they became. That was my biggest shocker moment. And it wasn't just one. It was multiple they were truly that dark, talking about torture and the kinds of torture. And yeah, it floored me.
Did you find yourself like having to take a few breaks now and then from some of the research because it was getting that dark?
No, and I think the reason that I didn't have to take breaks other than rest breaks was because they were so far removed. Because they weren't like 20 years ago, 50 years ago. It was hundreds of years ago. It was so far back that you can kind of relate, but not really. You're like, oh, it's one of those where you do that would never happen to me. Oh, that's so far removed. That's never going to happen. So I feel like that's kind of where my brain went when I was researching and they got that dark. It was this is so long since it happened. That person's gone, so they can't do it again. So it's okay. Yeah, I don't think my brain ever really went there. I think if I did nursery rhymes that are more recent, I think I would probably have to take a break. Because there are a few that I've seen that are fairly recent. This century, this era, that
Right.
Yeah, definitely had to take a step back when I looked at a couple of those.
Do you feel that there are some themes that feel familiar in today's age from those stories way back when, but not way back when? Things that we talk about on the podcast regularly, like, different forms of abuse, different types of trauma, different types of psychological control. I don't know if those themes that we talk about now that were definitely around back then, but maybe didn't have a name, weren't identified. do you find any familiarity in that type of darkness between then and now?
I do. So in some of the rhymes, it's kind of glossed over. You can kind of see it, but it's not really prevalent in that particular rhyme. There are a few rhymes where that is the rhyme. Child labor, coercion, um, those types of things. There's, Little Miss Muffet is psychological. Her stepdad was into all things creepy crawly. He was kind of into experimenting, and that's what he called all of his bugs were experiments. And she had to grow up with his experiments running loose in the house. She'd be sitting eating and something would crawl across her hand. And it was very psychological for her. Not necessarily like widespread brainwashing psychological, but there's definitely undertones of psychological in the rhymes. Seesaw Marjorie Daw is all about child labor and exploitation of children. So I definitely found that in my research that they do talk about it quite often in rhymes.
I know that we talked about this before we hit record, but you mentioned that you might read us a little segment of your Seesaw Marjorie Daw chapter. I don't know if you feel comfortable enough to do that now, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway.
Okay, I will. I'm going to preface this by saying reading out loud for a dyslexic person is horrible. So if I fumble over my words, I apologize in advance, but that's just what happens when a dyslexic person reads aloud. So let me get here. Let's see. Okay. So it's chapter 33, Seesaw Marjorie Daw, The Grim Reality of Child Labor and Exploitation. And it starts with the rhyme. Seesaw Marjorie Daw, Johnny shall have a new master. He shall earn but a penny a day because he can't work any faster. The seemingly playful nursery rhyme, Seesaw Marjorie Daw, conceals a darker narrative beneath its rhythmic lines. Far from being a simple children's chant, the rhyme offers a veiled commentary of the harsh realities of child labor during the Industrial Revolution, an era in which children were routinely exploited for cheap labor under brutal conditions. This grim reality is reflected in the rhyme's key themes: the relentless toil of working children, the paltry wages they earned, and the societal indifference that allowed such exploitation to flourish. Marjorie Daw herself may symbolize misfortune and societal judgment on those trapped in poverty and exploitation. The figure Johnny, the child laborer, represents the countless children who endured back-breaking labor in factories, workhouses, and mines for little to no compensation. In this chapter, we explore the historical context of child labor and systemic exploitation of vulnerable children, and the lasting impact of this grim chapter in history through the lens of Seesaw Marjorie Daw.
Hey, that was like, if you would have said to me, Brittany has dyslexia, I would have been like, well, I didn't know, wouldn't have known. I mean,
oh, thank you.
I don't know. Fantastic. So good. So good. I mean, do you think maybe it's a familiarity thing? It's your writing, it's your words, so you're familiar with the flow, with the content. Do you think that helps at all when it comes to reading things off a page?
I think it helps a little bit. I also may have cheated and reread this chapter to make sure that I was a little bit more familiar with it, because I knew that this request might be coming and I didn't want to fumble over my words.
So a little bit like a fascinating book. It sounds really, really interesting, and it is educational and it kind of it still is, you know, it's obviously true crime related, or I don't even want to say adjacent, because it is obviously looking at a lot of it being true crime, but it's also not like it's a it's different from, you know, this documentary on this serial killer, and we're going to break down his psychological profile, or his psychopathic profile, or his psychiatric profile, or whichever expert they have to come in and talk about that. You know, sometimes I'll find myself watching those shows, definitely less so in the last few years than I used to. But sometimes I think it's refreshing to, you know, still have an interest in learning about true crime, but just in a different way. And this is definitely that. Like, this is like new and different. And yeah, it sounds like a lot of love has gone into this, but you've enjoyed it as well. You've enjoyed the learning, and you know, learning all these skills, and yeah, just putting a hobby into an actual finished product. That must feel great.
It does. It feels amazing. Because yeah, I never thought I would do something like this. But I definitely, the research was so much fun. I definitely had a blast doing it. And the history that I found was extremely fascinating. You know, being over here in the States, we know enough about our friends in the UK, but not enough. And then when I was doing my research, I was like, wait, I didn't know that happened. You know, oh, wait, I didn't know he was a serial killer. I didn't know this. So all of the little tidbits that I was finding were a lot of fun. They made me want to look into it more and do more research about different things. So it was fun, and it was definitely a labor of love, because I poured my heart into this thing.
What would you say were the I mean, we may have already touched on some of these, but what would you say were the biggest challenges for you throughout this process, and what did you do to overcome those challenges?
So one of the biggest things, I mean, other than the dyslexia and trying to navigate around that and the tools that I had, it was definitely the funds. Just because I knew if I was going to do this, I needed to do it. So I needed to find a publisher. I needed to find someone to edit it, and that all adds up. So I needed to make sure that I had those funds readily available. So that was one of the challenges. The other challenge was, I had mentioned earlier that I had gotten laid off from my career of over 10 years, and that's when I started writing this. Well, 2 months later, after I decided we were going to do this and I started writing and researching, I got a new job. So then I had to decide, while this is amazing, I got a new job, which is what I needed, do I stop and just shelf it, which meant I would probably never come back to it, or do I try and figure out how to continue writing while learning a new career? Because it was a completely different job. And I decided to figure it out. You know, I've always been a pick myself up by my bootstraps, things happen for a reason, and just do it. So I did. It turned into late nights, long weekends. I still made sure that I got time with my fur baby, took him out, did all the things, ran him ragged. And there were times, you know, I definitely made sure that my family time didn't suffer. So when my parents or my sisters would call and be like, hey, we're doing dinner, do you want to come over? There were a few times I said, no, sorry, I'm really tired tonight. That was my go-to line. I'm really tired. Lying, not lying. And, but there were a lot of times where I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come over. And so I'd shelf it for the night. I wouldn't write, or I wouldn't do the research. And then I just made it a longer day the next day. But yeah, I was definitely trying to juggle my new job that I was learning with all of the things that had to do with the research and the writing and all of that for this book. So that was definitely a huge obstacle, but you know, it all worked out.
Whispers in the Cradle. I've just been looking at it on Amazon. The book cover is really interesting. How did you come up with that design?
So I wanted something. So I love true crime spooky things, horror movies. I'm a huge horror movie buff, all the things. And when I was doing this, all I could picture in my head was like that spooky, creepy interrogation room where it would have the light bulb over the table, the old wooden table. And I wanted that dark aesthetic, but I wanted to make sure that it was, that you could tell that it had to do with something specific. So, the muffin and the crown and the axe. I was like, I wanted some of those from the nursery rhymes to be put on the cover. And then as I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, how cool would it be to have an old book, like the center of the table with the spotlight on top? Why not put our book name on the book on the cover? And in my head, it just looked really cool. Well, I will say, while AI is very frowned upon in the book world, I had this idea in my head, and I knew that I could get an idea picture-wise from AI. So I put my idea into AI. I had them create it. It was not what I was looking for, but it was a place to start. So when I went to the editor or the publisher, I sent them that picture as well as what I was looking for. I said, I don't like this. AI created it. I don't like it. It's not what I'm looking for. But this is kind of the aesthetic I'm going for. And then here's what I'm really looking for. And this cover, it was in my head. I don't know how they reached into my brain and pulled this idea out, but they sent me this cover and I was like, did you like crawl into my brain while I was sleeping? How did you get this? Because this was the picture I had in my head and I just couldn't articulate it. So
That's great.
Yeah, so that
I like the book looks like it has texture on it, like those old fashioned books that almost feel like they have braille over the front cover.
Mhm.
And you can see that. And I like that obviously you've got a broken crown here, you've got a muffin with a bite taken out of it. And then there is like an axe in the top corner. So is that for the Lizzie Borden rhyme, or are like hatchets or axes just like a recurring theme?
I just liked the bloody axe. Lizzie Borden is not in this one. She might be in the next one. So, but yeah, I wanted something dark, and I thought, bloody axe is pretty dark, so I went with the axe. But other than that, the crown and the muffin were definitely, those are in there. I can't remember.
Yeah, we can see the crown behind you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the crown behind you.
It almost looks like you're wearing it when you sit in the sun.
Get my little tiara on.
So the second book, what do we know so far? How much progress have we made? Is there a title? What can you tell us?
So no title yet, but I decided I was going to do a second one similar to this one, and I was going to do American nursery rhymes. And I kind of threw that idea around because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do American, because we're a very young country and we kind of stole all of your rhymes and made them our own. So were we really going to have enough for me to write a book? And so I looked at it for a little while. I pulled up some rhymes that I knew, Lizzie Borden, and then I started looking at the hand clap games that you were talking about earlier, because we do those a lot here. I did them as a kid with my younger sister, and I found that a lot of those have really dark stories behind them. So I said, all right, looks like we're doing American. And, the US was definitely on my list because I have several other ideas that I thought about doing different countries. But I was like, you live in the US. Maybe you should do rhymes from the US before you move on to another country. This is where you're from. Maybe do a little research into your dark history before you start poking other people's histories. So, I actually talked to my family about it, and I was like, this is kind of my idea. I kind of want to do this country, but I'm not sure. I put it online for the private Facebook group that I have. I asked people, I gave them a poll, and none of them helped me. They all chose different countries, and I was like,
that's so tough when that happens. You're like, I know how I'll work this out. I'll ask for help. And they're like, you guys weren't any help at all.
That is exactly what I told them too. I said, you guys did not help me at all. And then I was talking to my dad and and my mom, and we were talking about it. And he's like, I really think the American one is a good idea just because you're from here. You already found a bunch of them. And I think that would be a good idea. And I was like, okay, I'll look, because if we don't have enough, then I'm not going to. But well, we have enough. The problem is they're really, really darker than these ones, and they're more recent. So as I was saying earlier, where I didn't really have to take a break during my research when it got dark, these ones they're more recent. So you can put them in context. And so they're very dark. And there's actually one that I was looking into that I don't know if I could include because of how dark it goes. So I don't know if I'd do a better warnings page, like a stronger warnings page, but or if I would leave that one out and just share it with my nearest and dearest, because it's definitely a really good one. It's got really good story behind it. It's just very descriptive. And yeah.
That's
so
tricky.
we're
That's
working
tricky.
on that.
You also don't want to, I mean, it depends how recent you're talking, but I don't know if you would want to directly upset, like family members of people who have had these rhymes written about, a loved one. I don't know if there would be any that are that recent, but I don't know. You always kind of run that risk, don't you, when you're looking at true crime stories from recent times.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to upset anybody. You also don't want, because the one that I'm talking about has to do with stranger danger, which is kind of how the rhyme came to be. And then it talks about children and horrible things that were done to children. But it was fairly recent. It was like, I want to say, if I remember correctly, like 1930. So I mean, not very long ago. And that, as descriptive as it gets, it's one of those where I'm like, it's a great story. I mean, maybe if I tone it down a little bit instead of going into all the detail, then maybe it would be worth it. But definitely don't want to upset anybody. I don't want it to be so dark that people are like, nope, I don't want to read it. I want people to enjoy it. I don't want it to be so harsh and scary that people are like, oh, no. So
just let me know what you decide with that one. I mean, it's hard to make that choice, but I'm sure that you'll work out how you feel at some point. On which way you kind of are leaning. But sometimes I find myself sitting with things like that for a long time and thinking, do I put this episode out? Do I not put this episode out? Do I talk about this on the podcast? Do I not talk? All of those types of things. And eventually you kind of make a decision. Sometimes that can take years though. Yeah, I'm not a very patient person, so I find that frustrating.
Yeah, my family's definitely like, so when's the next one coming out? I'm like, hey,
this one took a minute. Let me enjoy myself. So just to end today's chat, which I've really enjoyed, this has been a nice change of pace from some of the really tough conversations that we often have on this podcast. So I might even put this out as like a midweek special, just to kind of break up some of the other content a little bit. And I'm really looking forward to having a read, sharing my thoughts with the listeners, and hopefully some of the listeners will have a read and share their thoughts with me too. So before we end our conversation and direct everybody to Whispers in the Cradle, available on Amazon, or I'll put a link in the episode description on places you can purchase the book. What advice do you have for any listeners who are thinking about either starting their writing journey or trying to get their work published?
I would say definitely do your research. Don't just do it. If you're looking for a publisher, research your publisher. I would say there are definitely programs out there that can help you definitely find someone who can help you edit. If you are just starting and don't know where to start or how to start, I do recommend Atticus just for writing purposes because it formats it for you. But you can always use Word. You can always use that little transcribe button, so you can just talk into the microphone and it will write for you. But just find something that you enjoy and start writing. It might be you read through it and you're like, oh, I didn't like that. Change it. It's not just a one and done type of a thing where you just write and you're happy with it. I can't tell you how many times I rewrote certain sections and passages and research because I didn't like the way it sounded. But it sounded great in my head, and it sounded great the first time I wrote it down. So I would say if you're afraid to do it or just trying to start, just start writing. Even if it's in a little journal, you don't have OCD like I do. Just start writing a few minutes a day, write down your idea, and then go from there. Once you finish writing a chapter and you reread your chapter, it gets a little easier because you feel a little bit more confident because you're like, oh, that actually sounded pretty good. And now I know what I want to say next. Oh, and I want to know what I want to say next. So yeah, if you're just starting out, just do it. Just dive right in. Word is definitely your best friend, especially the transcribe, because that's amazing. And then for people who have done everything and they just want to get published, you can actually do it yourself. You can go onto Amazon and you can, as long as it's formatted correctly, you can go on and you can upload your stuff there. But you do need to know that you're doing the legwork. You're going onto social media, you're reaching out to libraries and podcasts and book clubs and all the things just to get out there. You're reaching out to bookstores to see if you can go in for signings. So you're doing the legwork. And then if you are going to get a publisher, do your research. Make sure that the publisher is going to do, one, what they promise, and two, all of the things to help you. So yeah, that's my advice.
Fantastic. Great advice. A little bit at a time. I find sometimes if I've got a big project, like I'm working on another podcast at the moment, like a limited series podcast, and it's very overwhelming. I just do a little bit every day, and it's nice to see kind of the bigger project come together, because when you think about like a book, oh my gosh, that's intimidating. That's overwhelming. But a little bit every day, it soon starts to kind of culminate into something bigger. So I love that advice. And I love what you've said about doing the research around getting published as well. I've just really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm looking forward to grabbing my copy of Whispers in the Cradle. And thank you so much for joining us today, Brittany. What an amazing journey.
Thank you so much for having me, and I would love to hear what people think. So when you do get your copy, once you're done, if you let me know, I would love to know what you thought of it. I hope you love it.
No, well, we can reach out and let you know, and maybe we'll get to have a follow-up episode when you publish book number 2.
That would be amazing. I'll work on it.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care.
Thank you. You too.